I didn't start with hatred. I started with a steady hand and a bowl that never left the Dubois table. If you want the clean version, the version people in Louisiana whispered about later curses, bad air, God's judgment, you can have it. But I lived the dirty version. I watched 3 people die while I kept serving coffee like nothing was happening. I watched doctors tilt their heads and call it mysterious, while I stood behind a chair and counted every breath in the room, waiting for someone to look at me too long. My name is Celine. I was born on the Dubois Plantation in 1822, on the Mississippi River north of Baton Rouge, where the cane grows thick and the air sticks to your skin like syrup. In 1851, was 29 years old, and I knew 2 things better than prayer: how to keep my face still, and how to put something into a man's mouth without him noticing. I'm going to tell you what I did, but I'm not going to dress it up. I didn't see the future. I didn't have some grand plan written on paper. I had fear. I had grief. I had the kind of anger that sits behind your ribs and makes your stomach hard. And I had sugar white, clean, shining sugar made from our bodies. That's what they loved most. That's what they couldn't go a day without. That's what I touched more than their skin, more than their silver, more than their goddamn family Bible. On the Dubois Plantation, sugar wasn't just food. Sugar was power. It was the reason the fields never stopped. It was why the sugar house ran like a furnace during grinding season. It was why men collapsed in rows and got dragged upright again like sacks. It was why women worked with their hands split open, still expected to move fast enough to make someone else rich. And in the big house, sugar was pleasure. Sugar in morning coffee, sugar in afternoon tea, sugar dusted on fruit, sugar folded into pastries that took hours. They tasted sweetness and called it civilization, while we swallowed smoke and sweat and called it life. The first time I understood how little we mattered to them, I was 8 years old and my mother died. Her name was Amelie. She was born in Saint-Domingue and carried that name like a secret blade. When I was small, she told me stories about the uprising there, about Toussaint Louverture, about people who decided one day they would not be owned anymore. She would whisper it like it was a prayer and a warning at the same time. Then fever took her, and nobody slowed the work. Nobody cried but us. There was no time for a child's grief when the cane needed cutting and the kettles needed tending. After she died, the women in the quarters raised me the way women have to when the world is built to break them: shared hands, shared food, shared watchfulness. I grew up learning what kept you alive. Not hope, not justice. Useful hands, a quiet mouth, eyes that notice everything and show nothing. I learned to cook and clean and sew because everyone knew the fields ate people. The cane rose swallowed you slow. The sugar house swallowed you fast. When I was 15, I was placed in the big house kitchen under Tante Josephine, the head cook who had been feeding the Dubois family longer than I'd been alive. She was 60 then, hair gone white under her head wrap, hands marked by years of heat and sharp edges, back bent like a question she was tired of asking. She was strict. She didn't waste words. She taught me how to make French dishes, Madame Marguerite Dubois demanded, like she was still living in New Orleans salons. She taught me timing, how to make everything hit the table like a clock. She taught me how to taste without flinching. But what she really taught me, the things she never said aloud, were the small truths that keep you from dying. The difference between a thing that helps and a thing that harms is often just amount, timing, and who controls it. Remember, child, she'd tell me while we worked, nothing in this world is only one thing. She didn't call it resistance. She didn't call it revenge. She called it knowledge, because knowledge was safer to carry than rage. On that plantation, rage got you buried. Knowledge got you through another day. Monsieur Philippe Dubois owned 247 human beings. I heard him brag it to visitors like he was counting horses. He was 52 in 1851, tall, graying hair, pale eyes that looked past you like you were part of the wall. His wife, Madame Marguerite, was 45, hair pinned and perfect, cruelty in her face like it was stitched there. She spoke French and English and a little Spanish, and she treated us worse than she treated her dogs. Her son Henry was 23, educated, travelled, and proud of it. The kind of young man who thought being born into money made him a gentleman. He laughed easily. That was the worst part. He could smile while doing harm. People like that don't need anger to be dangerous. They just need belief. And Henry believed we were his. That was the law. That was the air. That was the whole shape of the world. The Dubois plantation stretched 3,000 acres along the river. From the water it looked almost beautiful green ocean of cane. Big house with white columns. Galleries wrapped around it to catch breezes we were never allowed to enjoy. Gardens full of roses and camellias, a magnolia we tended on our knees. Inside were chandeliers from France and painted ceilings with Greek gods staring down at meals we cooked and never ate. Persian rugs we scrubbed on our hands and knees until our reflections walked in them. Silver and china worth more than a person, and no one had to say that out loud. It was known. Their world was built on that knowing. Our world was built on swallowing it. Every plantation had violence. The Dubois had the casual kind, the kind that wasn't just punishment, but entertainment. Philip Dubois could erupt over nothing. Food too slow, a door too loud, a glance he decided he didn't like. I saw him beat a man named Thomas until Thomas couldn't speak right afterward, all because Thomas walked too close and his shadow crossed the master's path. Madame Marguerite was colder. Her punishment wasn't loud. It was precise. She liked breaking mothers. I saw her sell a woman's baby over a broken teacup. A cup slipped, shattered, and Madame's eyes didn't even change. She just decided that a child would pay for it, because she could. The baby was gone the same day. The mother's voice broke against the air 4 days, until there was nothing left but silence. That was how we learned. Not from speeches. From what happened when a cup fell. Henry visited the quarters at night. Everyone knew. Nobody could stop it. The men couldn't protect their wives. The mothers couldn't protect their daughters. That was the kind of helplessness that doesn't just hurt you, it remakes you, piece by piece, into someone who can live with it. I became good at being invisible. In the kitchen, invisibility is survival. You are close enough to hear everything, close enough to touch everything. But if you want to keep your head on your shoulders, you don't make yourself memorable. You don't let your hands tremble when you pour. You don't let your eyes linger when you serve. You don't let your face react. You become part of the furniture. And still, even then, I thought I could keep my people safe in small ways. Extra food slipped to someone weak. A word to warn someone. A prayer shared in a low voice. Then Marie arrived. She was my cousin, sold to Dubois when her previous owner died. She came to our quarters 2 years before the breaking point, small for her age, thin, eyes too bright for that place. Hope is dangerous, but it was in her anyway. I tried to tuck it away for her. I tried to keep her inside, near the kitchen, where work is hard, but it doesn't chew your bones like the fields. I tried to teach her to fold dough and keep her hands quick and her mouth quiet. But Philip Dubois wanted labor, where it makes money. He sent her to the cane. And on a sugar plantation, the cane is a sentence. The stalks stand tall, the leaves cut like blades, the heat presses down until you feel like you're breathing through cloth. Men swing cane knives until their shoulders burn. Women drag bundles until their backs feel like they're splitting. During grinding season, the sugar house runs day and night. A roar of rollers and boiling kettles, steam and smoke and heat that turns the air into something you swallow. People get caught in machines. People get burned. People die and get replaced like broken tools. That's the truth of it. No speeches, just the machine running. The overseer in 1851 was Boudreau, white man from the Acadian parishes, poor but still above us, because the world said so. He carried his whip like it was part of his arm. He had learned that cruelty was courtesy. He spent it freely. In August, when the summer heat sits on your shoulders and tempers go sharp, Boudreau decided Marie was too slow. She was 14. 14 and small and trying so hard her hands shook from effort, not fear. She couldn't meet the quota of grown bodies. Boudreau didn't care. He walked up, boots heavy in the dirt, and told her she was slow like it was a crime. She said she was trying. She said it small, respectful, the way we're taught to speak. If we want to keep living, it didn't matter. He started whipping her in the cane rows. I wasn't in the field. I was in the kitchen house. But sound carries on a flat plantation. I heard the crack. I heard her scream. I heard him counting like he was measuring corn. 1, 2, 3. Each number hit my chest like a fist. I ran to the doorway and stared across the green rows and saw her drop to her knees, arms up, dress darkening, and I felt my body try to move. I felt it like an animal instinct run. Stop it. Throw yourself between them. But I didn't move. I stood on the threshold with my hands gripping the frame so hard my fingers hurt, because I knew what happens when you move. You get pulled into the same punishment. You get killed. And Marie still doesn't get saved. That's the kind of trap slavery is. It turns love into helplessness. It makes you watch the people you love get destroyed and tells you that if you try to stop it, you'll just add another body to the pile. He went to 20. When it was over, Boudreaux told everyone to get back to work, like nothing happened, like she was a mule that stumbled. 2 women half carried her back to the quarters. I met them there with water and cloth and hands that wouldn't stop shaking now that no one could see. Her back looked wrong, like the world had torn its own fabric. She kept whispering why, in between breaths. Why did he do it? Why did it have to be her? Why did trying not count? I wanted to tell her something that would keep hope alive, but hope is a liar in a place like that. All I could do was clean her and keep my voice low and steady, like my steadiness could lend her some strength. She survived. The body can survive more than the heart. But I saw her eyes change. Something went out. Something dimmed. The part of her that believed effort could protect you. That night, in my cabin, I listened to her crying through the wall, soft and broken, like she was trying not to be heard. And I realized something that made my throat go dry. The Dubois family would never stop. Not because we behaved better. Not because we worked harder. Not because we prayed. They would stop only if something stopped them. And nobody was coming to stop them. Not the law, not the church, not the doctor, not the river. We were alone in that green ocean. I thought about Tante Josephine's quiet lessons. I thought about the way she said knowledge is power, and how she never explained power like it was a grand thing. Power on a plantation is small. It's who touches what. It's who controls the bowl that goes on the table. It's who can change something without being noticed. And then, like a light turning on in a room I didn't know existed, I saw what the Dubois family loved more than their own reputation, more than their French furniture, more than their good name: sugar. They ate it every day. They drank it every day. They took it like medicine, like comfort, like proof the world belonged to them. And I knew I could reach it, not with a knife, not with a gun, not with some loud act that would get me chained and hanged before the sun set. I could reach it with a spoon, quiet, patient, invisible. A change so small it wouldn't announce itself. A change that would look like sickness, like fate, like God's hand, like anything except a woman in an apron. I didn't know exactly how it would happen yet. I didn't know how long it would take. I didn't know what it would cost me inside. I only knew this: if the Dubois family wanted sweetness every day, then sweetness would be where the debt got paid. And when I closed my eyes at night, the first clear thought I had wasn't poetic or noble. It was simple and hard, like a stone. I'm going to put death in what they love, and I'm going to do it so quietly they'll thank me while they swallow it. I didn't wake up the next morning feeling brave. I woke up feeling stupid, like I'd said something in the dark that daylight would punish me for. The quarters were already alive with coughs and footsteps, and the low sound of people getting ready to be used. Marie didn't sleep much. I heard her shifting, holding her breath when the pain caught her, trying not to make noise. When she finally sat up, her face looked older than it should have. I wanted to say I'm sorry, but sorry's cheap in a place where nothing changes. I told her to stay inside as much as she could. I told her I'd bring her extra water. I told her anything that sounded like control, even if it was only words. Then I went to the kitchen house and put my hands to work like always, because that's what you do when your mind is screaming keep your body busy so your face stays normal. The Dubois family ate breakfast at the same time every day. Monsieur Philip wanted his coffee hot, his bread light, his eggs exactly how he liked them, and if any part of that routine failed, somebody paid for it. Madame Marguerite wanted her coffee sweet enough to taste it over the bitterness. Henry wanted whatever was on the table plus something extra, like the world owed him dessert, just for waking up. Sugar was everywhere in that kitchen, sacks in the dry storage, the small bowls for sweetening, the powdered sugar for pastries, the syrup for candied fruits. But the family had one particular thing that mattered more than the rest: their private sugar bowl. Silver with a lid, kept on the dining table, refilled every morning. It wasn't just convenience, it was a symbol. Visitors used a different container, the kind you'd set out for company. The private bowl was theirs, their daily sweetness, their personal property sitting in plain sight like a crown. I watched that bowl like it was a living thing, not with big staring eyes, just with the quiet noticing I'd trained into myself over years. Who refilled it, when it was carried out, how much was used, where it sat, who touched it. Because on a plantation, the smallest routines are the strongest chains, and if you want to change anything, you have to know the chain link by link. I didn't have a poison hidden in my skirt. I didn't have a secret bottle of something dark. I had an idea and a fear of my own idea. I knew enough to know that obvious poison was a dead end. Doctors could look for it. People could taste it. If Monsieur Philip dropped dead fast, the whole kitchen would be questioned, searched, torn apart. My name would be said out loud in rooms I was never allowed into, and I would end up swinging from a tree or rotting in a cell. I didn't want a quick death, not for them and not for me. What I wanted was something that looked like life turning against them, the way life had turned against us so many times that nobody called it murder. They called it the order of things, but even with that, I wasn't calm. I was tight all day, every day, because the moment you decide to step out of the rules, you realize the rules are inside you. You have to fight your own fear first. That's what nobody tells you. I kept thinking of Madame Marguerite's eyes when a cup broke. How she didn't need proof to punish. If she decided something felt wrong, she'd take a child and sell it just to remind you. I couldn't afford to be wrong even once. I began with smaller steps, steps that didn't look like revenge, steps that looked like nothing at all. I started listening harder. In the big house, white people talk like the walls can't hear them, because they believe the walls are theirs. I heard Monsieur Philip complain about the cost of repairs in the sugar house, about rollers that needed replacing, about how the grinding machine had nearly taken a man's hand last season. He said it like he was talking about a horse pulling lame. I heard Madame Marguerite complain about insects, about dampness, about how Louisiana air spoiled everything. I heard Henry brag about a party in Baton Rouge, about French wine, about how he would inherit everything. I heard Boudreau in the yard joking with another overseer about whipping the slow ones until they learned. I heard the doctor's name now, and then Dr. Mercier, because wealthy people love having a doctor on call, the way they love having clean sheets. Every piece of it mattered, not because it was dramatic, but because it was ordinary. Ordinary cruelty, ordinary pride, ordinary carelessness. That's the kind that lets you slip something in. Tante Josephine watched me too, not like a master watches, like an old woman who has seen girls burn themselves by reaching too fast. She had a way of looking at you without turning her head fully, a quick sideways glance, while her hands kept moving. One afternoon she told me to stay after the kitchen was cleaned. The other workers went out. The fires were down. The heat eased. She sat on a low stool like her bones were tired of pretending. "You're carrying something," she said. Not a question, not an accusation, just a fact. My throat tightened. I tried to play dumb. "I'm tired," I said. She made a sound like a small laugh without humor. "We're all tired." "That's not what I mean." She picked up her mortar and pestle, the one she used for herbs, and turned it slowly in her hands. "When you stop breathing while you work, that's not tired. That's danger." I didn't tell her my plan. I couldn't. Even speaking it felt like inviting it to kill me before it had a chance to touch anyone else. But she knew me. She knew the look of a mind that had crossed a line. She didn't press. She just said, "If you do something, you do it clean." You do it quiet, and you do it with your eyes open. Nothing is worth it if it takes your soul and still doesn't change a thing. I wanted to ask her what soul meant in a place built to strip you of it, but I didn't. I only nodded, because nodding is safe. That night I went back to my cabin and stared at my hands until the candle burned low. The problem wasn't finding sugar. The problem was finding a way to change it without anyone noticing, and without it tasting different. And it had to work slowly, because anything fast would set off alarms. I thought about herbs. There were plants that could sicken you, make your stomach turn, make your head spin. But to many had smell, to many had taste, and doctors who'd been around slavery long enough had seen poison before. Wealthy people liked to imagine they were safe, but they also liked to imagine their enemies were everywhere. A sudden death would turn the whole plantation upside down. They would punish 10 people to find one guilty face. I didn't want 10 more bodies. I wanted them, and I wanted to live long enough to watch it happen. I kept turning it over in my mind until my thoughts felt worn down like stones in a river. Then the answer showed up in the most ordinary way, the way most dangerous things do. It was late August, sticky and hot, and I was washing crystal glasses in the dining room because Madame Marguerite liked the table to shine even when nobody important was coming. My hands were wet, the glass slick. One slipped, it hit the floor and shattered. For a second my whole body froze, because broken things in that house didn't just mean punishment, they meant humiliation. But nobody had heard. The family was outside. I knelt fast and began sweeping the pieces into a pan, and as I did, I saw the smallest fragments glittering in the light. Tiny, sharp, bright bits. The big pieces were obvious, but the dust, the near powder, it looked almost like sugar when it caught the sun. My stomach turned, not from fear this time, but from recognition. I had heard stories in the quarters, late at night, told in whispers, the way you tell a child about monsters, so they stay away from the swamp. Stories of people using ground glass as a weapon, not loud, not immediate, something you couldn't taste, couldn't smell, couldn't point to and say, there, that's poison. Something that would cut from the inside and look like illness. I don't know who first did it. I don't know if every story was true. I only know that, as I swept those fragments, my mind grabbed the idea like it had been waiting for it. It scared me because it was so simple. Glass wasn't a plant. It wasn't arsenic with a name. It was just glass, something that existed everywhere in that house, in windows, bottles, mirrors, lamps. If someone got sick, what would a doctor test for? What would a master accuse? They would blame the water, the air, the swamp, the miasma, anything except the quiet cook who refilled the sugar bowl. My hands were shaking as I swept, and I forced them to steady, because shaking draws eyes even when nobody is watching. I carried the pan of broken glass out like it was trash and dumped it where trash always went, behind the kitchen house. And as I walked back in, I felt my heart hitting my ribs in a way that made me think, this is either the stupidest thought I've ever had or the only way out. I didn't act right away. That's important. I didn't run and start collecting glass like a thief in a panic. Panic gets you caught. I kept working. I kept serving. I kept smiling when Madame Marguerite complained. I kept my voice soft when Henry barked an order. I kept my eyes down when Monsieur Philip's mood shifted like weather. I let days pass while I watched for any sign that my mind was playing tricks. It wasn't. The idea stayed. It sat in me like a stone, and the longer it sat, the more it felt like it belonged there. So I began, slowly, the way you begin anything you can't undo. I collected glass in pieces small enough to hide and common enough not to be missed. A broken bottle from the trash pile, a cracked pane from a cabin window that needed replacing, a splintered shard from an old mirror that someone had dropped in the quarters years ago and kept, because even broken mirrors reflect light. I wrapped each piece in cloth and tucked it under my sleeping pallet, not because I thought it was safe there, nothing is safe, but because it was the only place that felt like mine, and even that was borrowed. Every time I added a piece, my throat tightened. I'd lie awake listening to footsteps outside, convinced someone had decided to search cabins for no reason other than amusement. Sometimes they did that, just to remind us our privacy was a joke. But those nights passed. The glass stayed hidden. The next problem was turning it into something that could vanish into sugar. That part was work, real work, the kind that makes your wrists ache and your eyes burn. I needed the particles fine enough not to be noticed in the mouth, but not so fine that they did nothing. I didn't know the exact measure. I didn't have a scale. I only had my senses, my fear, and the patient slavery had forced into me. I borrowed Tante Josephine's mortar and pestle under a lie that wasn't even a full lie. I said I needed to grind herbs for a paste for Marie's back, something to keep infection away. Josephine didn't ask questions. She handed it over like she already knew what I was doing and had decided not to stop me. Or maybe she believed me. I didn't know. I didn't want to know. Knowing makes you responsible in a way that can kill you. I worked at night, when most people were asleep, using a single candle and the kind of quiet you learn when you've grown up afraid of sound. I ground the glass slowly, turning it into smaller pieces, then smaller, then smaller. The sound was soft, a dry crunch like sand. My hands cramped. Once, a shard cut my finger, and I sucked the blood quickly and pressed cloth to it, because blood is evidence. Blood is noise. I couldn't afford noise. After grinding, I sifted the powder through cloth, fine particles falling through, larger bits staying back to be ground again. It took hours. It took nights. It took a part of my mind I didn't know I could keep steady. And all the while, the plantation kept turning. People kept dying in small ways. Someone collapsed in the sugar house and was dragged out and forced back in. Someone's child was threatened with sale because a bed wasn't made right. Boudreaux's whip cracked in the distance like punctuation. Marie's back slowly scabbed over, each movement painful, her eyes flat. Every time I saw her, the grinding felt easier, not because it was pleasant, because it felt necessary. When I finally had a small jar of powder fine as flour, I stared at it in candlelight. It glittered faintly when I moved it. Beautiful. That word came to my mind and made me feel sick, because beauty shouldn't belong to something meant to harm. But beauty belongs to whoever controls the light. I needed to know if it would disappear into sugar the way I hoped. I mixed a pinch into a small jar of sugar and shook it. The glitter vanished into white crystals. I rubbed it between my fingers. I couldn't feel anything sharp. I touched a tiny bit to my tongue, barely anything, enough to know if it had taste, enough to know if it would betray me. It tasted like sugar. My stomach rolled anyway, because that was the moment the idea stopped being an idea. It became a thing I could do, and once you can do a thing, you have to live with the fact that you might. I didn't sleep much after that. I lay awake thinking of what would happen if I was caught. They would not just kill me. They would punish the quarters. They would whip men who had never touched my plan. They would sell children. They would make an example, the way Madame Marguerite liked to do, calm and clean. I thought about stopping. I thought about throwing the jar into the river. I thought about pretending none of it happened. And then I heard Marie cough in the dark, small and broken like she was trying not to exist, and my mind went quiet. I told myself one thing, not noble, not heroic, just true. They will do this again. To her, to someone else, to a child younger than her. And if I do nothing, I will still live with it, just in a different way. So I planned the first move. I could not add everything at once. Too much would risk someone feeling it in their mouth, or a sudden illness that drew the wrong kind of attention. It had to be gradual, the way the plantation killed people, slow, steady, hidden behind routine. I would add small amounts to the private sugar bowl when I refilled it, then stir it gently so it blended, then walk away like it was nothing. I told myself I'd start with the smallest measure I could manage, a teaspoon mixed into the bowl, and then I told myself another truth. Once I started, my face would have to stay the same every day, no matter what happened. I would have to serve coffee to people I was trying to kill, listen to them talk, laugh when Henry joked, nod when Monsieur Philippe spoke, and keep my hands steady. That was the real test, not grinding glass, not hiding it. The test was whether I could be the same person on the outside while something monstrous grew inside my routine. Late September came. and the mornings were still hot, but the light shifted. The way it does before grinding season begins, before the whole plantation turns into one long night of work. That morning I refilled the private sugar bowl. The silver lid was cool in my hand. I remember that detail because it felt wrong, something cool in a world that was always burning. I poured fresh sugar in. Then I added my first teaspoon of the mixture, the one that looked exactly like sugar. I stirred it slowly, not too much, not too little. I put the lid on. I carried it out. I set it on the dining table like I'd done 1,000 times. Then I stepped back and waited, breathing shallow, listening to the scrape of chairs, the clink of cups, the soft sound of a spoon dipping into sweetness. When Madame Marguerite lifted her cup, she looked satisfied, calm, unaware, and for a moment my mind did something strange. It tried to imagine she was just a woman drinking coffee, not a woman who sold babies over broken china. That moment passed fast. The spoon went back into the bowl. Monsieur Philip took his sugar. Henry took his. And I stood there with my hands folded and my eyes down and my whole body tight, thinking, don't look at them like you're waiting for something. Don't look like you did anything. Don't look like you're alive in a way they don't approve of. Nothing happened that day. Nothing happened the next. The first week passed with no change. I kept my additions small and spaced, every few days, measuring with instinct, pretending my only concern was breakfast timing. At night I listened for footsteps. I checked my hidden jar like a sinner checking a wound. I watched Marie heal on the outside and hollow out on the inside. I watched Boudreaux crack his whip at someone else, and I realized something I hadn't expected. Waiting is its own punishment. Because when you do something like this, you don't get relief. You get a new kind of fear. You fear being caught, yes, but you also fear that it won't work, that you've risked everything for nothing, that you've crossed a line and the world will stay the same anyway. That fear sat in my stomach like a stone, and still I kept going, not because I was sure, but because I couldn't go back to being the woman who did nothing after hearing Marie scream. By the second week of October, I heard Madame Marguerite complain at dinner that her stomach felt sour. She pressed her hand lightly to her abdomen. It was an inconvenience. She blamed the fish. She said she'd take laudanum and rest. I kept my face still, but my pulse jumped so hard I thought it would show in my throat. Was it working? Was it coincidence? I didn't know. I couldn't know. I only knew I had to act like I didn't care either way. That's the sick part. You can't celebrate. You can't flinch. You can't even breathe too deep. You just keep serving. Keep watching. Keep holding your own mind in place so it doesn't spill out on your face. And as her complaint faded into the usual noise of the house, I went back to the kitchen, washed the plates, and told myself, quietly, the same way you tell yourself to lift a heavy pot without dropping it. Keep it small. Keep it steady. Keep it quiet. And don't get greedy. By the third week of October, the complaint stopped sounding casual. Madame Marguerite no longer spoke about her stomach like it was a nuisance. She spoke about it like it was a betrayal, something inside her turning sharp and disobedient. She said it felt as if she had swallowed something that scratched when she moved. She said it with irritation, not fear yet, because fear was a thing she believed belonged to other people. I listened from the edge of the room, holding a tray, counting breaths the way I always did when something felt close. Monsieur Philip told her she was dramatic. Henry laughed and said the fish must truly have been bad. I nodded when they spoke to me. I poured coffee. I placed bread. I moved like the room expected me to move. Inside, my body felt hollowed out, like something important had been taken and replaced with a tight wire. The family sent for Dr. Mercier a few days later, not because Madame Marguerite asked, but because she complained often enough that it disrupted meals. Dr. Mercier was an older man, neat, confident in the way men are when their world rarely surprises them. He examined her in the sitting room while I moved quietly in and out with water and cloths. He pressed her abdomen, asked about her diet, her habits, whether she had strained herself. He frowned. He said there was no fever, no obvious infection. He suggested an ulcer, maybe inflammation. He prescribed laudanum, rest, bland food. He told her to avoid excess. I almost laughed at that word. Excess was the house itself. She took the medicine and complained it made her dull. She did not avoid sugar. That detail mattered. Sugar was not a luxury to her. It was a right. I continued what I had started, carefully, spaced, like a man planting rows in a field. He knows he will have to walk through again and again. I did not rush. I did not add more just because I wanted something to happen. I reminded myself every morning that this was not about speed. Speed would kill me. Patience had kept me alive for 29 years. It could carry me a little further. By early November, Monsieur Philippe began to change. Not dramatically at first. He complained of cramps. He snapped at people more than usual, which was saying something. He grew tired in the afternoons and blamed age. One morning I noticed blood on the cloth when I cleared his cup. Just a trace. He saw it too. His face changed then. Not to fear yet, but to offense. His body was supposed to obey him. When it didn't, it felt like an insult. He sent for Dr. Mercier again. The doctor came, puzzled now, his confidence dulled at the edges. To people in the same house with similar complaints unsettled him. He talked about the water, about dampness, about conditions in Louisiana that northern doctors didn't understand. He asked if anything had changed in the household. Nothing, Monsieur Philippe said, irritated. Everything was the same. Same food, same routine, same servants, same sugar. The words sat in the air like a thing nobody looked at. I kept my eyes on the floor. When the doctor left, I felt a strange urge to be sick. Not because I felt guilt the way sermons talk about it, but because the tension had nowhere to go. I was holding too much inside. At night, I dreamed of spoons clinking against porcelain, louder and louder, until the sound woke me. I dreamed of Marie screaming again, her back split open, and me standing still. Henry lasted longer. He was young, his body stronger, his pain easier to dismiss. At first he mocked his parents. He joked about old people's ailments. He went to Baton Rouge anyway. He drank, he ate heavily. He added sugar to wine, because he liked it sweet. I watched him with a focus that frightened me. Not hatred exactly, assessment. I was learning their bodies, the way I learned recipes, watching how they reacted, adjusting my own behavior, making sure nothing on my face suggested anything but routine. The plantation shifted as grinding season began. The sugar house roared to life. The air filled with steam and sweetness that coated your throat. People worked until they dropped. 3 died that season before Christmas. 1 fell into the rollers and was crushed so fast his scream didn't finish, to collapse from heat, and were dragged aside and replaced. In the big house, the Dubois family was also declining, and that parallel sat in my mind like a secret I couldn't share. Dr. Mercier came weekly now. He diagnosed Madame Marguerite with a worsening ulcer. He spoke of blood loss. He told her to eat less, to rest more. She obeyed the rest and ignored the rest. Monsieur Philippe was diagnosed with kidney trouble. Henry with intestinal distress. Different names for the same confusion. Different labels for something the doctor could not see. He prescribed tonics and purgatives. He bled them once, muttering about bad humors. I watched it all from the edges, my heart hammering every time someone mentioned the word cause, but no one ever said my name. No one ever looked at the sugar bowl like it was anything but what it had always been. That was the part that nearly broke me, the normalcy of it. They trusted the routine so completely they could not imagine it betraying them. And I was the routine. By December, Madame Marguerite could not hide her pain. She walked bent. She slept poorly. She snapped at everyone. Her eyes looked sunken, her skin pale. She increased her laudanum dose. She blamed me once, not directly, but with that look she had. The one that said, if something felt wrong, she would make it my fault. She complained that food no longer tasted right. I apologized softly. I offered to adjust seasoning. She waved me away. Sugar still went into her coffee. Sugar still disappeared from the bowl every morning. I felt myself changing as I watched them weaken. The fear didn't leave, but it hardened. It became more focused. I stopped imagining being caught every minute. I started imagining how I would endure if I was. That shift scared me more than the fear itself, because it meant part of me had accepted that this was happening, that I was no longer standing at the edge of a thought. I was inside it. Christmas came and went without celebration in the big house. Madame Marguerite was too ill, Monsieur Philippe too tired, Henry too distracted. The plantation did not slow. It never slowed. I served meals to people who barely touched them. I listened to whispered speculation among the whites. Maybe it was a curse. Maybe it was the swamp. Maybe the house was bad. I heard one woman say she wouldn't step foot inside if it were her. I wanted to laugh and cry at the same time. They were circling everything except the truth, because the truth did not fit the shape of their world. By January, Madame Marguerite was dying. There was no drama in it, no sudden collapse, just a steady fading, her body unable to keep up with the damage happening inside her. Dr. Mercier brought another doctor once, a younger man from Baton Rouge, who spoke confidently, and then grew quiet when he saw her. They whispered. They shook their heads. They could not find a single clean answer. On January 15th, 1852, she died in her bed. I was in the house when it happened, bringing water that went untouched. I saw the moment her breathing changed. I saw the exact second Monsieur Philippe understood he could not order his way out of this. There was crying. There was confusion. There was a flurry of activity that meant nothing. She was dead. I stood back with the other servants, my face arranged into the shape of appropriate sorrow, my hands folded so they wouldn't shake. Inside, I felt something like release and something like terror collide. This was real now. One of them was gone. The funeral was elaborate. Wealthy people love ceremony. They needed to reassure themselves that the world still makes sense. There was a Catholic mass in Baton Rouge. There were flowers and black cloth and murmured prayers. I served food at the wake, moving among mourners who spoke about tragedy and mystery and God's will. I listened to them speculate about illness, while they dipped spoons into sugar and stirred it into coffee. My ears rang from the noise of my own thoughts. I kept telling myself, don't change now. Don't get careless. Grief makes people look for someone to blame. With Madame Marguerite gone, I considered stopping. I considered taking the jar, the spoon, the whole secret, and ending it there. One life taken, one punishment delivered. But then I watched Monsieur Philippe order a man whipped to days after his wife's burial because the sugar house output was down. And I watched Henry glare at Marie like she was something broken he was tired of seeing. Nothing had changed. The cruelty did not die with her. It had simply shifted. I did not stop. If anything, the danger increased. With one person gone, the remaining two consumed more sugar. The doses I had kept careful and small now landed harder, without me changing anything. By February, Monsieur Philippe was bedridden more often than not. He grew thin. His voice weakened. Dr. Mercier suggested an autopsy when the time came, which made my chest tighten until it hurt. Autopsies meant questions. Questions meant attention. But even then, I reminded myself of what I had chosen. I had chosen something that left no easy fingerprint, something that looked like the body failing itself. In early April, Monsieur Philippe died. April 3rd, 1852. The doctors cut him open and found bleeding, damage, things they could not explain. They talked about cancer, about tropical disease, about the body simply failing. Henry listened, pale, shaking. I watched him from the doorway and felt a cold clarity settle in me. He knew now, not the truth, but the fear. He knew something was killing his family, and that it might not stop. The second funeral was larger than the first. Monsieur Philippe had been important. People came to mourn the loss of a man who had owned them or profited from them. I served food again. I poured coffee again. I kept my face still while people whispered about curses and bad air, and how the Dubois house must be poisoned by grief. Henry became the sole owner at 23. He was dying too, though he didn't admit it yet. He brought in doctors from New Orleans. He submitted to treatments that weakened him further. He sweated. He vomited. He cried out for his mother at night when he thought no one could hear. I heard. The plantation grew crueler under Boudreaux's hand as Henry faded. Power without control makes men brutal. Marie avoided the big house now, her body scarred, her eyes distant. Every time I saw her, I knew I could not stop. Not yet. Not when the last one still breathed. By June, Henry could not leave his bed. His fear filled the room like smoke. He begged the doctors to explain. They couldn't. They bled him. They purged him. They fed him medicines that burned his insides. Nothing helped. I continued my routine until the end, because stopping felt like tempting fate. On July 22nd, 1852, Henry Dubois died in agony. 23 years old. 3 people dead within 7 months from something no one could name. The region talked. The plantation froze. Lawyers arrived. Appraisers. Accounts were taken. The big house felt hollow, like a body after the heart stops. I stood in the kitchen and realized the waiting was over. Not the fear never leaves, but the part of the story where I could still turn back. Whatever came next would come, whether I was ready or not. After Henry died, the plantation did not mourn so much as it stalled, like a machine whose main gear had snapped and left everything grinding against itself. For a few days, there was noise, doctors arguing, Boudreau shouting orders louder than usual, servants running messages that meant nothing because there was no one left to answer them. But underneath it all was a silence I had never felt there before. No Dubois voice filled the halls, no footsteps from the gallery above. The big house felt emptied out, and that emptiness was dangerous because people fear a vacuum and rush to fill it with blame. I kept my head down more than ever. I made myself smaller. I let my hands move automatically, muscle memory doing what my mind could not afford to think about. Lawyers arrived from New Orleans and Baton Rouge, men with clean boots and papers that smelled like ink and authority. They walked through rooms like they owned them already, making lists, pointing, asking questions that were not meant for us. Appraisers followed, touching furniture, opening cabinets, weighing silver in their hands, as if human suffering had a price tag they could calculate. The word estate floated through the air like something holy. The word liquidation followed close behind, and behind both of those words was the one that mattered to us: auction. We knew what that meant. It meant we would be sold. It meant families would be split. It meant new masters, new rules, new ways to be broken. The end of the Dubois family did not mean the end of slavery. It only meant the end of one set of hands on our necks. I understood that clearly. There was no illusion in me that what I had done had fixed the world. It had only tilted one small piece of it. In those weeks, I felt the weight of what I had done settle into me differently. The fear of being discovered did not vanish, but it changed shape. There were moments when the house was quiet and the river breeze moved through empty rooms, when I wondered if someone would put the pieces together later, when I was gone, when time loosened tongues and sharpened suspicion. But I also knew something else, something steady. No one wanted the truth. The truth made them uncomfortable. It suggested that the power they believed was solid could be touched by someone they refused to see. It was easier to say curse, easier to say illness, easier to say God. Boudreau ran the plantation during that interim, and the man trying to prove he deserved to keep control. He was crueler than before, his whip quicker, his patience gone. He punished people for things that had nothing to do with work: looking the wrong way, standing too still, breathing too loud. Power without oversight always turns feral. Marie stayed mostly in the quarters, her back healed enough to work lightly, but never enough to forget. She didn't ask me questions. She didn't look at me like she suspected anything. She looked at me like someone who had decided not to expect anything from the world anymore. That look hurt more than her screams had. I thought of stopping Boudreau. I thought of doing to him what I had done to the Dubois family. But I knew better. Boudreau was replaceable. Another overseer would step into his place without ceremony. And if Boudreau fell sick, the questions would start sooner, because people expect men like him to die violently, not quietly. My plan had never been about cleaning the plantation of cruelty. It had been about ending a particular source of it, one that believed itself untouchable. That part was done. Now came the part I had not planned for: the waiting. The auction was scheduled for late August, exactly 1 year after Marie had been whipped. That detail did not escape me. Time has a way of folding in on itself like that, repeating its cruel jokes. In the weeks leading up to it, buyers came to inspect us. Men from Louisiana, Mississippi, even farther. They walked the quarters, asked about skills, examined hands and teeth, discussed prices like they were talking about livestock. I stood with the other kitchen workers and answered questions in a soft voice. Cooking, baking, managing. Yes, sir. No, sir. I expected to be bought quickly. Skilled cooks usually were. I expected to be separated from Marie, because buyers like to break what little comfort you have left. I prepared myself for that. Preparation is a habit you develop when hope is dangerous. And then something happened that I did not expect and could not have planned for if I had tried. A Quaker couple arrived, Samuel Wright and his wife. They did not dress like the other buyers. Their clothes were plain, their voices quiet. They did not joke. They did not touch people like objects. They asked questions differently. Not how much can she do, but what does she know? Not is he strong, but can he read? I watched them from a distance at first, suspicious, because suspicion is another survival skill. I had heard stories of abolitionists before, stories that felt like fairy tales, told to keep people from breaking completely. People who bought slaves to free them. People who helped others escape north. People who believed something was wrong with the whole system, not just with a few bad masters. Stories like that can get you killed if you believe them too easily. But as the Wright spoke to people, I saw something I recognized. Not pity, not savior talk, but a kind of deliberate care, the kind that understands risk and takes it anyway. They spoke to Marie, they spoke to me. They asked about our work, about our lives. They did not promise anything. They did not say the word free out loud, which made me trust them more, not less. Hope that announces itself loudly is usually a lie. When the auction began, the heat was thick and the crowd restless. Names were called, prices shouted. People were separated with a speed that made your head spin. I stood next to Marie, my hand close to hers, but not touching, because even that could be punished. When my name was called, the bidding started quickly. I heard numbers. I heard someone mention my cooking skills. Then I heard Samuel Wright's voice, calm, firm. He bid without drama. The price settled faster than I expected. Then Marie's name was called, and my chest tightened, because this was the moment it usually went wrong. But Wright bid again, and again for 3 others. 5 of us in total, bought together, bought quietly. The estate lawyers seemed pleased to move people quickly. Speed mattered more than squeezing every last dollar. When it was done, I stood there stunned, holding the fact like a fragile thing was afraid to drop. We were led away not to another plantation, but to a holding place near the river. The Wrights spoke to us that evening, not like masters, but like people explaining a dangerous plan. They said they intended to take us north. They said there were risks. They said nothing was guaranteed. They said we could still be caught, turned back, killed. They said if anyone wanted to refuse, they would understand. No one refused. When you have lived your whole life owned, the idea of choosing danger over certainty becomes simple. We left Louisiana by riverboat, moving north along the Mississippi. I watched the shoreline recede and felt something inside me loosen, just a little. Not joy, not yet. Something closer to disbelief. Each mile felt stolen. We traveled quietly, blending in where we could, staying alert where we couldn't. In St. Louis, we transferred to a train, and that alone felt unreal. The speed, the noise, the way the land blurred past. We passed through Illinois, Indiana, Ohio. With each place the air felt different, lighter, less heavy, as if the world itself breathed easier above a certain line. In late September, we reached Pennsylvania, Philadelphia. The city felt enormous to me. Streets full of people who did not all look the same, who moved with a kind of confidence I had never seen. In a lawyer's office, with papers laid out neatly on a desk, the Wright signed documents that declared us free. The word sat on the page like something fragile. Free. I read it slowly, my finger tracing the letters like they might vanish. I blinked hard. I was 29 years old, and for the first time in my life, no one could sell me. No one could order my body. No one could take Marie from me without consequence. The rights helped us find work and a place to stay. Marie and I found jobs in a restaurant kitchen. The work was hard, but it was ours. We were paid wages we could hold in our hands. We rented a small room in a boarding house. It wasn't much: one bed, a small table, a window that looked onto a street, but it had a door that locked from the inside. That detail mattered more than comfort. It meant choice. In the quiet of that room, the weight of what I had done returned in a new way. When you are surviving, there is no space to think about consequences. Freedom gives you space, whether you want it or not. I thought about the 3 people I had killed. I thought about the months of patience, the steady additions, the way I had watched them suffer and had not stopped. I asked myself questions that did not have clean answers. Was I a murderer? Yes. Did I regret it? No. Did that make me something I needed to live with? Also yes. The world is not as neat as people like to pretend. The Dubois family had killed dozens through labor, neglect, and cruelty, and no one called it murder. They called it business. They called it order. I had simply changed the direction of harm. That knowledge sat in me like a scar healed over, but always there. News from Louisiana filtered north slowly. We heard that the Dubois plantation was being broken up, the land sold, the big house standing empty. People whispered about curses, about divine judgment, about something rotten in that soil. I never corrected them. I never wrote back. Silence became another habit. In Philadelphia, I built a life the way you build anything after ruin carefully, with attention to detail, with an understanding that one mistake can cost you dearly. I worked as a cook for decades. I saved money. Eventually, I opened my own small restaurant. I hired people who needed work, many of them formerly enslaved, people who arrived north with nothing but their hands and their fear. I helped them find rooms. I taught them how to navigate a world that pretended to be free, but still watched them closely. Marie stayed with me. She married a free black man. She had children who were born free. Children who would never know the sound of a whip counted out loud. That fact alone sometimes felt like a miracle, too large to touch. I never married. I never had children. My life was work and routine and quiet evenings where I sat and listened to the city breathe. I carried my secret alone, except for Marie. She knew. She never asked me to explain. She simply said once, "You did what you had to do." I lived long enough to see the Civil War, long enough to see slavery abolished, long enough to see black men vote and black children attend schools, and to know that freedom was not a finish line, but a beginning, one that demanded more patience and courage than I sometimes felt I had left. When I died in 1895, at 73, people remembered me as a good cook, a quiet woman, someone who helped others find their footing. They did not know about the sugar, about the glass ground fine enough to disappear, about the careful waiting. They did not need to. The Dubois plantation was gone by then, the big house torn down in the 1870s, the fields planted with other crops, but the story lingered, passed in low voices in Louisiana, a warning disguised as a mystery. They said the sugar then never tasted quite as sweet afterward. I don't know if that's true. What I know is this: power does not always announce itself with violence. Sometimes it comes in a teaspoon, added daily, hidden in routine, waiting for the right moment to make itself known. I want to end this the way it actually felt, not the way stories like to wrap things up clean and moral and easy to swallow, because nothing about it was clean, and nothing about it ended when the papers were signed in Philadelphia. Freedom did not arrive like light through a window. It arrived like silence after years of noise, and silence can be terrifying when you don't know what to do with your own thoughts. In the early years after we settled, I woke up every morning expecting to hear an order shouted at me, expecting to feel that familiar tightening in my chest that meant I was already late for something I couldn't control. Instead, there was only the city outside, carts rolling over stone, people arguing, laughing, living. At first I mistook that quiet for safety. Then I realized safety is not the absence of danger, it's the presence of choice. And choice is heavier than chains because it asks something of you. I chose to work. I chose to stay invisible in a different way. I chose not to tell my story because stories can turn into evidence when they fall into the wrong hands. Even in the North, even after the papers, I knew better than to believe the world had suddenly become fair. I cooked because cooking was the one place where my hands still felt honest. Heat, timing, salt, patience, things that obeyed rules no one could change on a whim. I watched people eat and thought about how close mouths always are to trust, how intimate it is to feed someone, how that intimacy had once been my weapon and was now my living. Sometimes that thought made me feel sick, sometimes it made me feel powerful, often it made me feel both at the same time. I followed news from Louisiana the way someone watches a storm they barely escaped. The Dubois name faded quickly once the money stopped flowing. Wealth is loud when it's alive and very quiet when it dies. People kept telling the story of the 3 deaths, changing details, adding ghosts, inventing sermons where God spoke clearly and punished cleanly. I let them. Those stories were easier for them than the truth. The truth would have forced them to accept that a woman they would never look twice at had touched the center of their world and altered it. People don't like truths that rearrange their sense of scale. I never returned to the plantation. I never went back to the river that carried sugar south and bodies with it. I carried Louisiana in me anyway. It showed up in the way I flinched at sudden sounds, in the way I counted without realizing it, in the way I watched power shift in rooms and measured how close I was to it. Marie healed in her own way. She laughed again, eventually, not often, but enough. Her children grew without fear of being sold, and that alone changed the shape of her life. When she asked me once, years later, if I ever thought about what I'd done, I told her the truth. I said I thought about it every day, not with pride, not with shame, with responsibility. Responsibility is what's left when the world refuses to give you justice and you take something anyway. I don't pretend that what I did was righteous in the way churches like to define it. I didn't act because I was pure. I acted because I was tired of watching people be destroyed while being told that destruction was normal. I acted because Marie's screams didn't leave my head. I acted because knowledge had been placed in my hands, and knowledge, once held, demands a decision. You can use it or pretend you don't have it, but pretending doesn't erase its weight. I lived long enough to see men argue about morality in public halls, to hear people debate slavery as an idea long after it had been a lived reality that crushed bones and spirits. Those debates always felt distant to me, abstract, neat. They never mentioned the smell of the sugar house at night or the sound a whip makes when it lands just right. They never mentioned the way fear settles into your muscles until it becomes pasture. I didn't need those arguments to tell me what was right. I had lived the answer. When I died, my grave carried only my name and dates. No confession, no explanation. That felt right. Not because I was hiding, but because the story was never meant to absolve me or condemn me. It was meant to exist as it wasn't finished, uncomfortable, human. The Dubois family believed themselves untouchable because the world had always touched others instead of them. I showed them that touch can move in more than one direction, quietly, slowly, measured in teaspoons. If there is a lesson in this, it isn't that revenge is sweet. Revenge is bitter work, and it stains you even when you believe it's justified. The lesson is smaller and harder. Power lives in places people stop looking, and survival sometimes asks you to become something you never planned to be. I was Celine. I was a cook. I was enslaved. I was free. I was the woman who learned that sweetness can hide anything if you understand how people consume it. And I lived long enough to know that even the smallest hands, if they are patient and unseen, can change the ending of a story everyone else thinks is already written.